guys, Funky Music here. Hey, getting a lot of questions in the stream about Funky, what's the fastest way to level up in Icecrown or even Lordaeron? I'd say, guys, the fastest way to level up, in my experience, and I'll go off the higher rated realms, and this probably will work for the lower rated realms as well. Depending on where you start at, you're going to want to try to get more towards the Eastern Kingdoms, as the zones are a little bit smaller and easier to maneuver. Also, the Eastern Kingdom seems to have less horde unless you're heading north into the Plague Lands, Western or Eastern. So, something important to remember, that you need to try to get somewhere where it's a little bit smaller, the zone's a little bit more easy to traverse. That way you're not running over the place trying to turn in quests, spending more time running from point A to point B and potentially dying, or even running into horde, which horde are more on Kalimdor than they are on the Eastern Kingdoms again, unless you're heading north. So, as you can see here, I've been playing my level 23 human warlock. Some of the quick ways that you can level up here. If you do have in level 80, you might want to consider buying BOA gear. This is bind on account gear. It can be sent across to any character. Certain things will they will level as you level. Certain pieces will give you, excuse me, will give you extra experience. So very important to have those. The shoulders, and I believe it is the ring, is it? I can't remember. The shoulders, maybe it just is the shoulders. But the items that you can get for that level with you, that way you don't have to replace all pieces of gear. You're not going to find really anything. There it is. The chest piece, excuse me. The chest and the shoulders both give you a 20% boost to experience. So it's a fast way to level. If you have a level 80 already and you're looking to create another character. But if you're starting here fresh, you're not going to have this gear or the access to this gear. Now, there are ways to get around that. You can donate for gear. But I find the most effective way would be to take a route more like this. So even if you're starting in Tedrusil, obviously you complete the quests in the zone until you get about, a level 10 to 11. Or even if you're starting in Exodar. And then you're kind of going to want to make your way, which is very possible, but you can run from Dark Shore all the way down to Duskwalla Marsh. From there you can take the boat from Theramore Isle, and that will take you over to the Eastern Kingdoms. You'll end up in the wetlands here at Manithil Harbor. From there you can run all the way through Dunaglaze, which will actually take you out near Loch Modan, and then you're going to come up here and take this this road up here, which will take you to Dunmorrow, which will bring you up to Ironforge. From Ironforge you can get inside Ironforge and take the tram, which will take you down to Stormwind City. Now, the reason I do this is it's actually faster to do this. If you could get somebody to give you a ride, possibly, or you get a friend that you're playing with, you two can go together. It'll be a lot quicker. There's an underground tram in Ironforge that will take you to Stormwind. Not only this is great because it links you up with Ironforge, that way you can get 2 capitals right off the bat, but it also will get you, if you make sure you pick up all the flight points in Manithil, that you're picking up the flight points in Ironforge and in Stormwind City. Now you kind of have a connection all the way up. So if you're starting down here, obviously the first place you're going to be going is where I currently am, and in Westfall. And it's a good place to start after you reach about a level 11, 12. Great place to start here, and from here you're going to be going to Lakeshire, and from Lakeshire to Darkshire. Those two kind of intermingle in between each other. Now, you don't have to take this route. This is just a route I'm suggesting here, because the zones are a lot more smaller over here, as you can tell, compared to Kalimdor, where the zones are pretty big. There's not as many places, plus the Barrens, Durotar, pretty much horde controlled because Mulgor's there. So this is all horde, and there's no way to really get around without having to go through the Stone Talon Mountains and Desolus. And Desolus really is a huge area. I mean, it may look comparable in size to Westfall, but it is just a huge area. But it's just better to stay away from the horde altogether. That way they don't interrupt your leveling experience. So from Lakeshire and Darkshire, you're going to be going into up to Hillsbrad, Rothi Highlands, South Shore, into the Hillsbrad foothills, and working your way into the hinterlands then, and then going from there, even the Alterac mountains. All the zones you really need to hit are all going to be right next to each other. So that way when you continue to level, you can move from zone to zone pretty quickly. Now, people also ask me, Funky, when do I know when I'll move from one zone to another? When the quests start turning green for you, or even gray, you may want to look into moving on from that zone, because they're just not going to provide the experience. Now, if you go to a neighboring place and the quest is red, and what I mean by that is when you go to your quest log, I have no active quests right now, but when you go to your quest log, they'll pop up a green colored text, a yellow colored text, a gray colored text, or a red or orange colored text. The orange ones are difficult, but they're still doable. The red ones are basically impossible for you to do. Yellow ones are right at your level. Green is a little bit under you, and gray is way underneath you. So you want to keep an eye on where you are with your quests. Very important to do. If you're planning on gaining experience as fast as possible, you want to be in that yellow, green, orange range of quests is kind of where you want to be. But after that, you're going to be wanting, after Hinterlands, I believe that's 40-ish levels, you're going to be wanting to move in kind of into the Western Plaguelands, and then after the Western Plaguelands, you might hit a snag in the Western Plaguelands trying to move from Western to Eastern, just because it's so hard. I think there's a bit of a difference between the two as far as leveling goes, so you might have to come down, do some things, in Red Ridge Mountains, Stranglethorn Vale, which I would highly suggest avoid Stranglethorn Vale at all costs. This is a huge PvP area where Horde and Alliance both tend to have huge PvP wars, so try to avoid it at all costs, but it is possible to get in there and get some quests done without being bothered too much. So just keep that in mind. Once you reach close to levels, I believe you can leave the old world, the vanilla realms, at level 58, but I tend to stick around until level 60 and or even 61, even though the quests don't give as much experience. It just makes it easier when you go to Outland. So if you're looking for that last push, Eastern Plague Lands is a good place to go. The Blasted Lands is another place you can go. At that point, it might be worth you going to Tenaris, maybe even Ungoro, or even Syphilis, even though I would highly suggest avoiding Ungoro and Tenaris. Both Horde and Alliance spend a lot of time there doing quests, so a lot of farming going on and stuff. There's instances in Tenaris that people will still go run back and go do, so just remember that there's going to be high levels in Tenaris, even some high levels in Ungoro protecting their alts. Syphilis, not so bad, but just remember that those quests there, those zones are... Kalimdor, like I said before, itself is really, really hard to quest in because of all the Horde or if you are a Horde player, you're better off probably leveling in Kalimdor, even though the zones are a lot bigger and you have to travel a lot further. You're not going to be running into a whole bunch of Alliance players unless you're coming down here to Ungoro or Tenaris or heading up the Dark Shore. So as long as you avoid those zones, you should be alright, Horde-wise. Not a lot of Alliance are really going to be out here because the Horde have two capital cities right here, whereas the Alliance capital cities are on islands way out here, and they tend to either... I forgot to mention, you can also take the boat from Darnassus, I believe, all the way to Eastern Kingdoms, if I'm not mistaken. You should be able to pay attention to the signs and watch the signs. I'm not sure if that got changed or not. I can't remember. After that, you're going to be moving to Outland. Now, to get to Outland, you're going to go to the Eastern Kingdoms. You're going to go to the Blasted Lands, and you'll see the Dark Portal here. You're going to go through the Dark Portal there. Or if you're in a major city, there should be a teleporter near the mage area of each capital city where you can just teleport right to the Dark Portal. And you want to pick the quest up before you go into the Dark Portal. Make sure there's a quest giver outside of the Dark Portal. Should be the only guy giving a quest out there. If you're at the appropriate level, you should pick it up, head through here, and then you begin the great journey of Outland. You will start in Hellfire Peninsula. It's also, before I get too far into this video though, I also want to say that while it is important to be questing and making sure you're keeping, in that green, yellow, orange range of quests, it's also a good idea to start doing RDF. Now, RDF is the Random Dungeon Finder. I believe you could start doing it at, I want to say it's 13, 14, somewhere around there is when the lowest level of instances start, and 15, Okay, 15 would be Dead Mines and Wailing Caverns. So at level 15, this will open up to you, and you can start doing the Dead Mines and Wailing Caverns. A lot of people on the higher rated realms really don't do a whole lot of RDFs, just because they might have a friend run them through or something like that. Or the queue takes forever, because looking for finding for tanks and finding healers for 5-man dungeons takes a while. But it's always a good idea while you're questing to go ahead and just hit your I button, and it'll bring this dungeon finder up, and just hit find group. And it might be a while before you find somebody, but just keep it there. And if one does pop, it is definitely worth picking it up. I like to pick one up. Well, this one's just waiting on a healer, actually. I definitely like to pick it up because it's not only is it get away from the questing of the game, it's a really good experience when you just run through a dungeon really quick. So just something to keep in mind when you're playing. You want to get away from questing, you want to do something else, definitely hit the RDF button. Or if you want to do some PvP, you can also do that and get a break away from things. So those are the options that you'll have available to you. But yeah, definitely keep that RDF up. You're going to get a satchel of helpful goods. You're going to get 35 silver, and you'll also gain experience. Now this changes every time you level. It will go up. Eventually you'll start getting different rewards and whatnot, so just something to keep in mind while you're leveling. So let's go ahead and leave the queue before I accidentally get the queue to pop and then make somebody mad because I decline. And back to the Outland, what we're going to work on here on Outland. So let's go ahead and zoom out. Let's go to Outland. So you're going to start in Hellfire Peninsula here, and same concept really. You're going to get, but the difference is, whereas Vanilla WoW was 1 through 60, here it's only 60 through 70. So these zones are going to go pretty quick. You may get 2 to 3 levels per zone. Try to squeeze out 4 if you can, but if the quests just aren't there, then go ahead and move on. Like I said, you're going to pick a quest up outside the Dark Portal there, and you'll bring you to either Thrallmar or Honor Hold, depending on what faction you are. The Alliance will come to Honor Hold. Try to do a lot of the quests there. You're going to realize that a lot of the gear you're going to be getting in Outland will be significantly better than the gear that you found out in the old world. That's why a lot of people like to rush in here at 58, because they can come in here at 58, start getting a lot better experience, start getting a lot better gear. But gear doesn't really mean a whole lot when you are leveling. So you're going to start in Hellfire Peninsula. Now here's where people tend to go 2 different ways. Either you'll head to Zangarmarsh or Terakar Forest, depending on how high level you are. Zangarmarsh you could probably get in at probably about 61, 62 would be okay, and Terakar is more about the 63, 64 range. You're going to burn through. I tend to go to Zangarmarsh, just because there doesn't seem to be too many horde or alliance out here at any one given time. There is a raid out here, Serpentine Cavern, that people do come to, so try to avoid the middle of the lake here when you're leveling. But other than that, you should be pretty well free. Whereas Terakar Forest, really, Terakar Forest has the capital city, and I keep clicking into the capital city. The capital city of Shadowmoon City is here. So if you plan on doing something here, there's also a daily out here at Skedis. People working on their dailies, high level 80s working on their 80s out here. Plus you have Archdown. There are 4 separate raids, and there's people farming, especially druids farming for their Anzu mounts out here if they don't have the coins for it. So a lot of zones here, and there are quests that you're going to be doing out here in the Bone Waste around Archdown that you really should try to avoid this area and around Scatties. But other than that, this area here should be okay to level in. Just something for a point of reference. Places to avoid if you are, even Horde or Alliance, for that matter, should probably avoid those 2 zones until you're level 80 yourself and you want to come back here and do this stuff. But there are 5-mans in here and whatnot, so if you do, like I said, keep queuing for RDF even when you're leveling at all times, because it is a good break from the game, and it is some pretty good experience, and you might pick up a piece of gear, which does, even though you will be changing gear, like gear does help you. So from there, you're going to move into Grand. Now, Grand is a really big open place with a lot of, one of the most beautiful zones that you probably ever be in, and there's a lot of things to do out here. The only place I would say that you really want to avoid would be the Laughing Skull Ruins, because people are doing the chain quest out here. Try to stay away from this area. Horde and Alliance are really out here. Maybe also try to avoid Hala, as people still try to, once in a while there'll be the war for Hala going on, so try to avoid that area as well. But other than that, this is a free roam area. Tons of quests out here. Really good leveling and just an all-around great zone. From there, you're probably going to be going into Blade's Edge Mountains. And this can be a little tricky too. You shouldn't run into too many horde. By this time, you're also going to want to have a flying mount. I think you have to have a flying mount, if I'm not mistaken, to even get into Blaze Edge, but I could be wrong about that. I think there is a cave that brings you straight in. But this zone really requires a flying mount to get around to some of the areas. It's better to have a flying mount here. You could skip over these huge tall spikes that seem to be going everywhere in this area, as you can see. Gruul's layers out here. That'll be a point that you do want to avoid, but generally I don't spend too much time here, maybe a level or two, and then I'm moving on to either Shadowmoon Valley or Netherstorm. I prefer to stay in Netherstorm, just stay away from the Tempest Keep, which is actually floating in the air, so this whole area here should be pretty open to questing. Area 52, there'll be some people maybe here and there, but yeah, definitely. I like to go to Netherstorm versus Shadowmoon Valley. There seems to be a lot of people farming out in Shadowmoon Valley. Yeah, Black Temple's out here. Of course, there's tons of people coming out to do Black Temple. And there's a Netherwing Ledge out here. Is a Reputation faction daily out here as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're out here leveling. Kind of avoid those zones, and either which one you go to, regardless. Normally I would say stick around and level up till 70, but really you should probably leave as soon as possible. Try to get to Outland, or try to get out of Outland as soon as possible, which you could leave at level 68. Now at level 68 you're going to be going to, I prefer to go to Stormwind because it's just easier, I think. You're going to be going to Stormwind, you'll be taking the docks outside, and you'll be taking one of the boats, and one of those boats will be bringing you to Northrend. Now depending on which one you take, which boat brings you here, the Stormwind one usually brings you into Borean Tundra, or you can go to the Howling Fjord, which one you prefer. I just like doing Borean Tundra because Dragonblight is right there, and I can pop right into Dragonblight, and I usually just quest right across the zone until I reach Grizzly Hills, and if I still need another level or two, then I can hit Grizzly Hills. But yeah, Borean Tundra is a great one to get into. I think Borean's going to have more horde in it, but it's a much smaller zone, easier to maneuver. I think Howling Fjord it kind of can get difficult with the ledges and getting certain places, and it really helps to have a flying mount out here. So if you do have the gold and you could pick up cold weather flying, definitely do that. But just a lot more things. The ground just isn't as flat out here, I would say, where there's just ridges and everything that's going on out here. And then of course Grizzly Hills, a little bit more flatter terrain, just a lot of trees. Again, easier to have a flyer out here. Nothing really doing, because you're out here in Northrend, people are going to be doing RDF queues, so not a lot of Horde Alliance out in the world here in these first couple zones. Maybe the guys over here at this pond right here doing their daily fishing quests. That might be the people you run into. Or raid groups forming in the Nexus, which that really doesn't happen a whole lot, and a lot of people don't go out there. So either which zone is really good. I would say Howling Fjord probably has the less competition in it versus Borean, but just keep that in mind while you're leveling. And then like I said, you can go to you can head into Dragonblight, or you can head to Grizzly Hills. Now I usually like to stop off in Star's Rest. Will be the first place you go. Agenal Rub, there's a couple raids here. This is the problem with Dragonblight. There are a couple raids here. You also have Wyrmrest Temple, which has a raid in it at Ruby Sanctum, and then Naxxramas. So there are 3 raids, 5-man dungeons here at Agenal Rub, and then a raid here at Wyrmrest. There's a couple raids actually at Wyrmrest Temple, and then of course Naxxramas, the first raid in the game, is over here on the far right. So you have 3 raids, basically 3 zones where you can enter, where people are higher level 80s are going to be coming around. But it shouldn't be too bad, especially with them having flyers. There's no real reason. A lot of the farming goes up here, normally around the crystal ice, to kill the worms upstairs. But the problem I have with Dragonblight is it again is a hard place to get around and maneuver and find out where the quests are sometimes. But the ones at Star's Rest are pretty close by, so I like to stop there. Do some of those. Mocha Harbor is another good one. Definitely some places in here that are worth stopping out. Winterguard Keep, though, can get a little crazy because it's so close to Naxxramas, so just something to keep in mind if you do head out to Winterguard Keep to do some of the quests out there. That Naxxramas is right there, and there's a raid there, so you might run into some hostile other factions out there, either Horde or Alliance, one of the two, whatever you're playing. The other option is come out here to Grizzly Hills, and you can go to the Westfall Brigade encampment and then level up from there. I actually would prefer to be out here, just the way I usually take, though, because you level up so quickly. You're going to be getting, like I said, again, like 2 to 3 levels per zone, maybe 4. If you come in at 68, you would probably prefer to have 4. That way you can get up to 72. Make things a little bit easier. But after those 2 zones, you're going to more than likely head to Zuldrak. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because Zuldrak is basically the only place to go in between, having the 2 starting zones and the 2 next zones. And then Zuldrak, really, I mean, Shalazar's there, depending on what your level is. But Shalazar gets farmed a lot by miners, because this is where the most ore in the game spawns. So there's always Horde and Alliance out here. You might want to avoid that. Where Zuldrak really only has Gundrak up here at the top, and the arena here in the middle. You're going to want to avoid that until you get the quest. Then you probably want to see if you can get in there and do that. But other than that, this really has a Tyram's End, Volterras, and Zeramis here at Light's Breach in the Argent Stand really have a good storyline in the game that's really important. So if you can, come here and do these quests, because it's a really good storyline when leading up to the Wrath of the Lich King fight, or the fight against the Lich King, rather. After you do that, Shalazar, you can come here and do a couple quests out here. Stay away from the edges. Stay away from the edges. Stay away from River's Heart, and stay away from. What's the other one that you have to stay away from all of a sudden? I don't think there is. But I would say, yeah, definitely stay away from the edges as much as possible. River's Heart, there's a fishing daily out here for level 80s, so they will be congregating here. Just something to keep an eye on. They will be flying all over the place. There's a certain flight path that people have marked out after all these years, to where to fly to get the, try to get the best ore, the most ore in the quickest way. So normally they won't bother with you, but you know how some people are, they just want to kill you and rape you. So just keep that in mind. From there, you're going to have a choice of going to Icecrown, Storm Peaks. Really, you should start in Storm Peaks. I'm not even sure if you can actually start in Icecrown. I think you do have to go to the Storm Peaks first. And actually, Crystal Song, no. Yes, you would have to go to the Storm Peaks, do the first quest out here. I'm not sure if they really want to call that, because it's really not Icecrown. It's really not. Well, I guess it is Icecrown. The Argent Vanguard, you could start there, and then you could also start in Storm Peaks. Now, the great thing about Storm Peaks is you're gonna come into probably the one thing that you have to have, your shoulder enchants, which is at Dun Niflheim. So the quests out here will actually start that. Will take you along a whole quest line to come out here and do this quest. So it's really worth your time coming out here to do this, because every single person needs to come out here to do these quests to get the shoulder enchants in game. Whereas depending on what class you need, you may not have to come out to the Shadow Vault. Now, here in Icecrown, you're going to have, not only are you going to have the Icecrown raid, which you should definitely avoid Icecrown Citadel. Definitely avoid outside. TOC is up here, but anything outside of TOC, the raid, you might want to be careful on. So just something to think about as well. Where Storm Peaks has Udalar, but it's all the way up here, and people usually are flying so high over top of the mountains, they're not really going to bother you. Just a note on Storm Peaks, once you get past the Dun Niflheim quests, I would stop questing here and head to Icecrown. It's actually going to probably be more beneficial, because things in Icecrown are a little bit easier to get around to than they are in Storm Peaks, because of how broken up it is and all the mountains and a lot of caves out here. It's just going to be easier going to Icecrown, where you can stay above ground and mounts and have all that stuff available to you. So coming out here to level, you definitely want to pick up the DK quest, which I believe starts on one of the flying ships, depending on if you're Horde or Alliance. There's a quest you can pick up from them, I do believe, and start the basically the Knights of the Unhold reputation faction, which is here up at the Shadow Vault. So very important for if you're playing DPS or a tank. I believe they also have tank stuff, if I remember correctly. But I definitely know they have DPS stuff that you definitely need to come up here to get the Shadow Vault. So that's the questing line that I've always really used, and it seems to work well for me. I remember I basically leveled my level 80 Druid in retail in a matter of 2 weeks just by following that, and I've pretty much followed that strategy wherever I go. Now, there might be better strategies out there, people who could, you know, might show you something a little bit different. Again, this depends on what faction you're playing. If you're playing Horde or Alliance, the different paths you might take. I'd say the only thing that you might want to change is if you are playing a Draenei or a Night Elf. You may not want to make the run, or may not want to take the boat all the way over to the Eastern Kingdoms. If you do want to level here in Darkshore and Ashenvale, Fellwood, and all these areas up here, just be prepared to. It's going to take you longer to get from point A to point B because the zone is actually bigger. So it's just something to keep in mind. Also, again, there's going to be more Horde out here, especially if you cross down into the Barrens or anything like that, which you will eventually have to do. Like I said, unless you plan on crossing through, even to get to the Stone Talon Mountains, you're going to have to eventually come through the Barrens. You're going to have to cross into Horde territory to get to the Stone Talon Mountains. So sometimes it's just easier to avoid that area. Really PvP heavy areas, especially at the crossroads. Avoid that at all costs. There are some nice raids at Razorfen Crown and Razorfen Downs. Between I think both of them. One's high level 20 over here. Crow's like a high level or mid level 20, and Downs is in the 30s to the, I want to say, the mid 30s to upper or low 40s, somewhere around there. So some good quests down there as well. But just something to think about. There's many different paths you could take when leveling, but that's the path I usually take. It has worked out well for me. If you don't like that, do your own thing. You know, have fun, do your own thing. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want to give this guide out there for people who are looking for a faster way to level, to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that we normally run into while we're out here leveling. And hopefully this video has been of some help to you, and I'll see you guys on the stream. Thanks a lot.